Hello, Emil.
Hi, Sagar.
We started off with the history of chess, and in the first episode, we spoke about Morphy and Steinitz. And I think it's very logical that we move on to the next person on this list.
Yeah, obviously, if we already continue some sort of a series, we have to go by order and continue with Emanuel Lasker, second world champion and absolutely outstanding personality. If I would single out people who impacted the image of chess, how chess is perceived by others, what was the, let's say, contribution to the way chess has evolved as from just a board game to something which can be considered a sort of a culture, then I think Lasker plays an important role. Not because he was 27 years world champion and everybody knew who is world champion, so he is there. Not because of that. He was probably this connecting bridge before, Steinitz came up with all these revolutionary ideas. And then Lasker was the one who made chess to be something respected and important. So chess moves slowly from the cafes or from the occasional events to something reputable. The world champion title is respected. Money has tripled or even more from Steinitz time to Lasker time. He is the one who starts to be known to wider public. And what's very important, if Steinitz was a person who grew up without high education, just being a chess revolutionary and great player, Lasker is a man of enormous intellectual ability. He's a great mathematician. We'll get to that later, but he has till now there is an important theorem in mathematics named after Lasker.
Really?
Just to wow. Think about it, how impactful it was. He was an intellectual of caliber of Albert Einstein, I would say.
Seriously?
Yeah. He had, many people don't realize, okay, Lasker, 27 years, probably no good players around, and he declined some matches, and that's it. So that's what people know about it. But Lasker was absolutely like a huge monumental figure. He would be impactful not rather in the way chess was played. I wouldn't say that he contributed great deal for the game to evolve, but for chess as something special, as to be respected, as to be seen as something noble and prestigious. Yes, Lasker played an enormous role. He became world champion in 1894.
How old was he when he became a world champion?
He was born in 1868.
16.
68, actually on December 24. So he was born 155 years ago and 1 week. Well, 1 week after. Curiously, he shares the birthday, not just the birthday, but the year also, with another great player of that time, Richard Teichmann. Teichmann was a very good player, top 5 player for 10 or 15 years. He won several important tournaments, but most importantly, Carlsbad tournament, which saw all the younger generation. It was 1911, I think. But I think it's the only occasion when you have world champions and a player of top 5 sharing the birth date, not just the birthday. They were born both on December 24, 1868. And so
now maybe we have this unique case now.
What is?
Which is that Ding Liren is born on 24th October, I think. And Vidit is also born on he's the candidate now. So
it's the same year also?
No, actually 92 for Ding and 94. Yeah, not the same.
That's what I say. Okay, of course the business could
Correct.
be and work, but that was the same. He was born in, I think it was by that time East Brandenburg, because Germany as a country did not exist by that time. There was this lands which was separate territories by that time. The territory which he was born now belongs to Poland, so it's eastern Germany or eastern part of Germany, which through years evolved. It was German part, Polish part. So now this is it's Poland. He was born in a Jewish family, and as we spoke in last series, most of top players by that time was of Jewish descent. It's why it happened. It's a topic of a separate discussion. But or let's say on the end of 19th century or middle of 19th century, of many top players had Jewish roots. But contrary to Steinitz, it's already a generation of not Jews living in a ghetto and getting somehow out there. It was the first generation of assimilated Jews. So his father was already a respected figure. They were, let's say, urban people already, not ghetto or village people who were studying Torah and then their kids came there. No, he was more German than Jewish, maybe. Surely Tarash was more German than Jewish, and he even baptized himself later on, which didn't happen to Lasker. Lasker always had that knowledge. But anyways, he grows up in a family with 4 kids. I think he was the youngest of the 4. His elder brother was a very good chess player.
Yeah.
That's also probably a unique case. He was a master level chess player. And curiously enough, of all matches Lasker played in the 19th century, the only one he didn't win, it was against his brother.
Really?
It was they shared first, second place, and they played in the playoff, and it was a draw. Not one game, it was, I think, 2 or 4 game match, but they drew. Wow. He was a really good player, and once beat Lasker also in master tournament. He was not top 10 or something, but he was, let's say, surely top 10 German players of the time. So he grew up with a keen interest in math as well, and started playing chess. Well, by that time, chess was not clear if it's going to be his career or he will just continue his studies. He was not like very young prodigy. By that time, it was very few. It only started later when America came up big and Reshevsky could travel and do it.
But this was in 19...
It's really the beginning, 19, between 2 wars, more or less. But at the end of the 19th century, this didn't happen, and he played some local tournaments, and his first success came at the end of 1888, I think, or beginning 89, when he won a local but strong tournament in Breslau, which is now Wrocław, Poland. The tournaments, there were 2 tournaments. One of them was a main tournament, which was won by Tarash, who was older. And the second tournament, which was won by Lasker. It's actually funny how Lasker won his first tournament to qualify to the first international. He was trailing by 1.5 points before the last 2 rounds. And the leader, in the penultimate round, he lost the game, very long game, which was adjourned twice or something, and on one of the adjournments the pieces were set up incorrectly.
Oh.
So it was the whole story, and then the guy lost, and Lasker caught him, and then they played playoff, and Lasker won and qualified for the main tournament next year.
Wow.
And there when Lasker's big chess career starts, and he starts winning tournaments one after another, establishing himself as an absolute top player within 3 years. That's a very rare feat for that time. Now, you should understand that it's not like today when you have 20 tournaments, 30 big tournaments a year. Typically, a person would play 3, 4 tournaments a year by that time, and only one of them or maybe 2 of them were significant. Others were very, very local. You could play some cafe once again. Here's where transition comes. So it's a good time also for America, and Lasker travels to America. He sees a lot of opportunities, and in 1893 he participates in a major tournament in New York. It's still not major internationally maybe, but it has all the best American players, it has Lasker, and it has several, maybe a couple of more European. And Lasker scores 100%. He wins all the games. It's one of the very rare cases with international top. It was not, let's say, super tournament, but there were 3 or 4 top 10 players.
But how did Lasker become so good, like so quickly?
Okay, that's a good question. Historians, once again, I said it in the previous one, historians may have a precise answer. I don't know many things which would be hidden in the archives, which in which cafes he played with which players, it's difficult to know. But he obviously mastered it in playing many.
By playing.
Yes.
At that point, it was not like studying, right? You improved just by playing.
By playing. Typically by playing. Studying came later. It was already Rubinstein, and this like 20 years after that or so on. By that time, they were not very much into studying, or the books were very limited, and they were also very, let's say, basic. You could hardly, being Lasker, you could hardly, let's say, get to top 2 level by studying books. No, he played many matches as it used to be, and he beat all the best players of the time. He beat Blackburn, he beat Mises, he beat Pardeleben, all the best.
These are just very strong players, right? So what kind of separated Lasker from these players? Like what made him so good? Because I mean, all the names you took, they are well known. Blackburn and all were the best of their time.
I think the best quality and trait of his playing style was his enormous practicality. He was not theoretician. He had a sharp eye for, let's say, short tactics. So he would be. You couldn't just bluff him with some, beautiful idea, but then sound one. So he would refute often. He also was a sort of a player who could maintain the pressure, maintain the tension in the position. That was a quality which has been unknown for many players before and even afterwards. It's very difficult, you want to have a resolution, you want to have some exchanges, you want to have some breakthrough. And he could keep it already in the early stages of the career. He was never as bright, and as a player, as a person, he was absolutely... he was in a way ultimate player. Like he played the chess as a game, as a game where he needs to choose the best strategy against a particular opponent to win this game.
If you had to compare a modern player with him, who would you choose? Like maybe the present day.
Well, first of all, present day. Most of them play in this way because now, but for different reasons. Because now all the theory is known, and then it's very difficult. By that time there was still no theoreticians to overcome, and then it could have been interesting rivalry between someone like Rubinstein, who was a very deep, very innovative, very well prepared, and Lasker, who was a player, who was an ultimate player who would seize his chances, who would play a particular style against a particular player, and that was the differentiates him from nearly everyone. So Lasker surely and not so slowly climbs to the top, and already after winning this tournament, winning in New York 1893, he challenges Tarrasch. Now, Tarrasch by that time was considered to be the strongest players in the world. To remind you, Steinitz is a world champion, but he's aging. He was born 1836, and we're talking 1893, so he was already 57. But Lasker still didn't win a single major international tournament, contrary to Tarrasch. Now, Tarrasch was in his height at the beginning of 1890s. He won 3 international top events in a row. And Lasker felt that his win in New York, ahead of a couple of very strong players and a long string of masters, allows him to, let's say, to challenge Tarrasch, more so that he already beaten all those who I mentioned. But Tarrasch actually answered in a very arrogant way that, boy, you still have to prove to challenge me.
It makes sense, right? Because Lasker was just beginning, sort of.
Right. It felt, also the news spread much slower there, right? So you have Tarrasch, who was not much older than I think. Well, I'm always afraid to err here and there, but I think Tarrasch was born 1862. I'm almost sure 1862. So he was 6 years older, which is meaningful difference. And he already established himself in 1880s. He was already established player, but he won in 89, 1890, and 92. There was 3 most important events. All of them were won by Tarrasch. So he was clearly highest rated player in the world if the rating exists by that time. And so he declines this offer to play, or this challenge to play. Now it has to be said that Taras was also a very successful doctor. He was medicine doctor, practicing, was very, very respected, and he saw himself as a part of, he's a very important person who also plays chess. Now for Taras, there is a separate stories about him. He was very, he was a character. Getting back to Lasker, it was very important to understand how was the whole idea that he can challenge Steinitz, because they didn't play even one game before.
But didn't Taras ever want to challenge Steinitz?
That's the most curious thing. Why Taras Steinitz match never took place? I think we would never find out the clear answer. There was no challenge from Taras to Steinitz. I don't know for what reason. Hard to say.
But Taras would have won, yes, at that point.
I think at that point Taras would be favorite. Okay, I don't know, because Steinitz was still pretty good.
Because what Steinitz said about chess, Taras kind of contradicted, no? In some ways, like I think Taras always liked the isolated pawn. There's the Taras defense now. And Steinitz was not such a big fan of such dynamic concepts, right?
Well, I would say that Taras was building up on Steinitz theory. It was not like an opposite one, because the opposite, you could say, Nimzo, Reti, Breyer, these were opposite of the theory. Let's say instead of center, attacking the center. So Taras was a classical player. So he was definitely seeing the Steinitz as his great predecessor.
Got it.
But he was saying that the game is evolving, and he was coming with important concepts. But it was built, let's say, upon the fundamentals of Steinitz. Anyways, thing happens that the challengers declined, and Lasker, he was never shy. I mean, he was always very self-confident, and he challenges Steinitz to play the match. Now Steinitz was in a bit difficult situation. What to do? I mean, this guy hasn't proved himself yet, but you should have known Steinitz for his quality. He always was up to a challenge. Was probably the most, well, let's say, fighting world champion. He always was looking for a way to prove himself, to prove his concept, to prove that he's still the worthy world champion and so on. So the guy is 58.
He has played until now the match with Zukertot,
Yes.
Steinitz, and
Then he played the match with Chigorin. Then he played the match with Gunsberg, and then another match with Chigorin. He played two matches with Chigorin. One was with Gunsberg and one was...
so he has he got his title in the first one, then defended it thrice already. This is where Steinitz is.
He defended three times after he...
Yes. So right now when Lasker is challenging him, he's already been world champion for
Since 1886
Yeah.
for 1894, 88.
8 wars.
I think, I mean, if Steinitz would have declined this challenge, that would be normal. Because, I mean, Lasker still should have proven himself. But no, he accepts the challenge. Maybe partially the financial conditions played a role, because Steinitz, once again, he was a chess professional, pure chess professional, and maybe the financial proposal was worthy, and he accepts the challenge, and they play a match.
At that point, whenever someone had to challenge a world champion, they had to find the money, right?
Yes.
The challenger had
Challenger has to find money. Now there were two ways to do it. Either through collecting some sort of donation, so donuts like today, or there were some sponsors. Yeah, for the match. Yeah. So typically, player would not. Before that, they would put their own money sometime, but
Really?
yeah, to play, but not for the world championship title. Was the small matches. Anyway, the match takes place 1894, and Lasker wins. The match is equal up to game 7 or 8. Steinitz plays not worse at all. But then he loses, I think the score was like 3.5, and he loses from the winning goal very advantageous position. And then it was all downhill, and he loses the match. I'm afraid to go wrong, but I think it was 10-6. And it was pretty close match. and Lasker becomes world champion, 1894. But for the chess society, it's still not confirmed he is the strongest one. Because, he still didn't win a single top international tournament. He beats aging champion, which many regarded already as not the strongest player by that time. And the resolution should come probably at 1895. And 1895 it has famous Hastings sword. And why is Hastings so famous? Because it actually, for two reasons actually. It assembled every single best player in the world. 3 reasons. B, it was a sort of a clash of the generations, because still the generation of let's say Steinitz and Bardeleben were pretty strong, but the generation of Lasker was replacing them. And C, because public even there was no Twitter, but even there they loved the stories, And here is a story, Pillsbury. I mean, Harry Nelson Pillsbury, almost unknown to wide the public, comes from America, not being a top player, being second rated if the ratings were exist American player, and he comes and wins the tournament.
Yes.
And that's an amazing story by itself.
Actually, I have read this book, 62 Most Instructive Games of Chess by Irving Scherner. It was like in a simplified language, and one of the games was the last round game of Pillsbury from 1895. I think he played with Gunsper the last round. It was this.
He won for
It
sure.
was this amazing night end game where Pillsbury. It's like there are a few other people who are also on the same score around him.
Yes.
He has to win at last round.
Yes.
And he starts to make one forcing move after another, and it was very thrilling for me to read that.
Look, the way Pillsbury played in that tournament is absolutely outstanding. Take a look at the games. I mean, half of the games, or nearly like that, were of a true grandmaster quality even by today's standards. Absolutely. I have huge admiration for Pillsbury. Now, the tournament was actually absolutely amazing, because it was a very closely contested round between all the top players, but it started with actually Bardeleben, the one which we keep mentioning, taking an early lead, beating also some top players, and leading with something, maybe 8 out of 9 or 7 out of 9, with a tremendous score. So he's leading the tournament, and then he plays this famous game against Steinitz with this rook e7, rook f7, rook g7.
Oh, it's in.
That's from there, yes.
Oh.
And that's the game where he was leading. People don't realize he leads the table. He led the table before.
But he leaves the tournament room and goes.
He leaves the tournament. Yeah, it's shocking.
It's true?
Yes.
Is this true?
Yes. He just left. Yeah.
And Steinitz waits there for like.
I don't know
minutes.
how long and so on. Maybe he. Steinitz was not a person just to sit and wait quietly. I mean, he must have sweared probably. So it was.
Oh, I didn't know it happened in such an important event.
Yes, and
It
an
looked-
important moment.
Yeah.
So Bardeleben is an experienced player, but he's not too old yet. So he also looks for, and he loses his game. He loses the leadership, and then he starts losing one after another, and ends up maybe semi-successful. But this tournament was also important for Chigorin, because Chigorin, let's not forget, is considered to be number 2, number 3 in the world by that time. And he's very, let's say, motivated to prove it. He sees main rivals as Lasker and Tarrasch, and suddenly you have this guy Pillsbury. I mean, they didn't know he could be that strong. It becomes a very close run, and Pillsbury wins, and I think Chigorin is second, Lasker is third,
Yeah.
Tarrasch is fourth, and Steinitz is fifth. Well, at the end of the day.
Oh.
Maybe opposite, maybe probably this one. But Steinitz also had a very nice run. It was all close margins there. So Lasker didn't manage to prove that he's the strongest. He didn't win the first top tournament. Young Unknown is ahead of him. Chigorin is ahead of him, and the only consolation is that he is ahead of Tarrasch. Tarrasch writes an article summarizing the event, and it's very nicely summarized, and he says Chigorin played fantastic. Pillsbury played a fantastic tournament. Chigorin, as usual, had the remarkable games, and world champion proves that he's also a strong player. Yeah, it's something. It's once again, you see, parallels with Twitter is very much alive. So yes, Lasker proves that he belongs there, but he doesn't prove that he's the strongest.
Right.
And then few years it takes for Lasker to prove that he's the strongest. Next year they play very strong tournament in Russia. 4 best players, quadruple round draw. It says once again with Chigorin, with Pillsbury and Steinitz. And Taras declines. So 4 players, and they play round after I think 4 games in each other. And early leader has been Pillsbury, not early, like a half distance or something. But then he collapses, and then Lasker wins the tournament with a reasonable margin. I don't remember, 1.5, 2 points, or something like that. Then couple of more events. Then Lasker accepts a challenge from Steinitz, who has a right to rematch. Obviously, everyone realizes that's already it's no match, and it is no match. It is 10-2. It is
Huge.
Yeah, it is huge. So basically, by the 1899 or so, 1898, Lasker already establishes himself as world number 1, with a very little contention, maybe only from Pillsbury by that time. Chigorin is growing old. He will also die a few years after, in 1905. Steinitz is old. Steinitz is going to die in 1900. And Taras seems to lose an ambition, and he misses most of these top events, doesn't participate. So only Pillsbury is a real force to be reckoned with, but Pillsbury falls ill. That would lead to his demise a few years after as well. He died very young, prematurely. So this generation was very strong, of 80s, end of 86s, beginning of 80s, 70s. Among all these players, a part of those who I mentioned already was also Aditya Sur Roy, who was also born 1868 as Lasker was. Karl Schlechter, who was born 1872. So it was very, very strong generation. That's why also when we start discussing generations, that today we have an amazing generation. I think if you take into account how many players are playing, and it's not exceptional to have 10 or 15 very good players.
Right.
But by that time, let's say a number of absolutely outstanding players, let's say compared to the number of players who actually played chess, was enormous. So this generation, maybe 1872 is the youngest player, and then it comes already different generation with Rubinstein, Aleheim, and so on. Lasker establishes himself as clearly number 1 in the world. He still doesn't win all the tournaments. He let's say, famous tournament in Cambridge Springs where Frank Marshall wins an important event ahead of Lasker. But there is little doubt who is strong. He faces some challenges. He plays matches with Marshall. He plays matches with Janovsky, just wiping them out. 8-0 with 3 draws. That would be typical score. In another match, somebody managed to snatch 1 win, but it doesn't matter at all. And Lasker loses a bit his motivation. He focuses back to studies in mathematics. His very first work was published in 1895, a year after he became world champion. But he keeps writing, and in 1905 he publishes this Lasker theorem, which he published in not in just some magazine, in the most prestigious math magazine by the time, and he proves some theory which is very important. It's not Albert Einstein theory, right? But still, some very important one. Discovery, and he is widely acclaimed mathematician by that time as well. He doesn't play a lot in tournaments. It is explained very simply. He feels that if you respect chess, if you want to see me, find a reason and pay easily. It doesn't happen often. Most often when it happens in Russian. Funnily enough, Russia was a country where both the Tsars and the Bolsheviks, communists, both of them actually have very good funding for chess. So he plays in St. Petersburg in a tournament which we mentioned. Then he plays a match with Steinitz, which in St. Petersburg. In 1909, he plays a big tournament in St. Petersburg where he shares first, second place with Rubinstein. This is years of Rubinstein. Rubinstein actually beats Lasker in their encounter, 1909. But Lasker still ties with him on the same number of points. And these 3 years, from 1909 1912, Rubinstein was clearly the strongest tournament player in the world. He wins everything, or almost everything, sometimes second place.
Lasker is already now quite old.
Not quite old, because we will move later in 25 years ahead, and we will still find him in top 5. so it's difficult to say he was old. So he was what? 40, early 40s. But once again, he was such a super brain. I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know anyone in chess history who would be as, let's say, monumental as a person as. I mean, they were bright people, very bright people and great players. Two striking examples would be Kasparov and Tal. Shining examples of intellectuals. But Twinik, in a way, he was less sharp, but he was very, he was. But I wouldn't put them near Lasker still. And I'm not talking about other guys. But I have respect for everyone. And obviously, to become world chess champion, you had to have special gift. But Lasker was one and only. In 1914, he plays tournament once again, Tournaments of Champions. It was so called in St. Petersburg again. And that's the one where you have the most famous game Lasker ever played, which is, you will tell me.
Is it this move, rook e5, rook c5?
No, it's with Starish. That we should cover, yeah. It's with Starish. But the most famous move he played is f4, f5, I think, against Capablanca in Ruy Lopez
Giving
exchange.
up this e5
square, yeah.
Playing then with
Bishop f4,
yeah. Yes.
So by that time, it was in a way revolutionary, because you would not, the concepts were very dogmatic. You shouldn't weaken the square and so on. What he did is, in a way, how computers think today, how we already know how to think. We were taught by computers that there are other factors compensating for weak squares and so on. So he plays, and it was a decisive game, actually. He was trailing Capablanca before that game by 1.5 points with just a few rounds to go. And then he beats him, and then Capablanca also loses to Tarash. And so Lasker wins again in 1914. Has to be said, also quite uniquely, that he played all these generations, and the part of Capablanca whom he lost the match later on, he was not in a minus score with anywhere. So he had a plus or equals, typically a plus score with everyone. As for the challenges, 1908 finally comes a match with Tarash. Though that was some sort of, I think, personal grudge from Tarash anyway, because the guy was so good 20 years before. He would be a favorite, I would say, in 1890 with Lasker. But by that time, either it was a matter of overconfidence, or he wanted to prove his point, or he just felt that it's now or never my last chance to play a match. Anyways, he challenges Lasker to play, and it is 1908. They play in several German cities throughout Germany, and it's very bad. 8-3, I think, or something, because that was several draws. So it's not evenly contested. The only evenly contested matches when Lasker was champion, a part of Capablanca, was with Karl Schlachter. That was a match which still remains mysterious, whether it was a world championship or not at all. We know that it was born as an idea of not a world championship match. At the beginning, they were planning to play several games or a short match or something. Lasker did have several short matches. He played a match with Janovsky 2-2 and so on. Whether this idea was from the mini match to move to a proper match, how to say? At the end, they play match only out of 10 games. That never happened before or after. Even in our time, we don't go to here. We still go with 12 really.
Right.
And then, so 10 games by that time, that was absolutely exceptional, and it's hard to say why it was. It was a lack of funds, or it was in an unofficial match. Still, there are discussions about that. Whether Schlechter had to beat with +2 score, as some allege. How to say? Anyways, Lasker manages to save the match, winning the last game, as we know, and it is 5-5 with 1 win each. Schlechter was actually quite a player. He never was seen as a very dangerous opponent, but he lost so few games that it was he was always finding himself in the top 5 or something. And these are his best years. So 1910 they drew the match, and then comes a World War I, and it was horrible for everyone. People outside Europe do not realize how brutal it was, how it was a total bloodshed within Europe. And in a way you can compare it to World War II. Because, it was a bit shorter, there was no Holocaust, there were no such things, and maybe the fighting was the war was less, how would I say, you wouldn't have war crimes, and that would differentiate it in a way. But it was very real bloodshed, and it cost fortunes for many people, Lasker included. He loses all his money, all his savings, and if he is a very financially established person before the war, he finds himself losing all his savings, and that makes him basically to get back and play chess again. Now it has to be said that throughout his career, Lasker played very few tournaments. Would you give him, let's say, guess how many tournament games he played? Tournament or match game, but official games. So it is a period of 50 years.
Should be around 1,000 games.
Yeah, that would be a good guess, right? You know that he didn't play much. 506.
Wow.
So he played very, very few events. And there was a number of years when he didn't play at all. He was either focusing on math, and then there was a problem with the war. Nobody played. And that happened also in the after World War. He immediately he didn't play as well. And partly due to that, of course, he kept his World Championship title. But it's not only due to that, once again, because, let's say, when he accepts a challenge from Capablanca, and that's and they to play a match in 1921, that's already, by that time, clear that Capablanca is clearly number 2 or number 1 in the world. Rubinstein has been badly impacted by the World War I, and he's no more contender. Also, his mental situation deteriorates. It has to be said that Rubinstein lived a very long life. Think about it. You know, the guy, you think of him as being, competitor to Lasker. Maybe Capablanca, maybe Alec.
I think of him as more a competitor to Capablanca.
Yeah, maybe Capablanca. But the guy lived to 1961, so he lived to see winning Tau.
Wow.
So he was.
But he was not playing later.
He was not playing. He stopped playing completely, I think, before World War II already. And then by miracle, he survived the Holocaust. They say that the Nazis came out. They knew that the Jewish person lives in the house, but luckily the guy who was a head of local Nazi, he was a keen chess player, and he knew that it was Rubinstein, and he made sure that he's not captured until, yes, and that's the way he survived. It was in Belgium. He lived in Belgium also the last years of his life. And then at some point after that, he was always with oddities, let's say, but by that time he already became mentally unstable. Anyways, back to Lasker, he accepted the challenge from Capablanca. They were leading negotiations for a long time, and then the match to happen. But the only country which gives money is Cuba, which was not impacted by the war, which backs Capablanca. And in general, everything would be okay, but Lasker is not a young man anymore, 1921, so he's 53, right? Yeah, he's 53, and he has to travel. He sails to Cuba, so he makes a little travel, finds himself in a hot, tropical, humid climate, which doesn't make him any better to play, and he loses the match and loses it badly. He loses 0-4 with, I think, 10 draws, so he doesn't win a single game. And he resigns the match even before this. I mean, it was up, I think, up out of 20 games or up to 6 wins, whatever. He resigns it. He cannot continue if he wouldn't like to continue. He does get very well paid for that, not for resigning early, but for, let's say, for the match. Irrespective of the result of the match, he would get 2/3, I think, 2/3 of the purse.
Wow.
Yes. And it could have seemed as an end of a career.
Yeah.
He is 53. He has a lot of other interests. Let's say he never limited himself to chess. We know about math, I told you. But he also was a keen player, Go and bridge, and very good player. And I cannot really evaluate how high he would be in rankings. But he was more than a chess player who plays also bridge or Go. It's not like today's chess players who also play poker and sometimes appear in Las Vegas. No, he was like a, let's say, maybe not sub-top player in this field. So he was very good. He doesn't play much. He plays occasionally, but what he plays, amazingly, he's still absolutely outstanding. 1924, New York, 1924. They come up with a huge chess tournament. And what happens there? 1924, the guy is already 56. Event where everyone plays, where Capablanca plays. Well, the young generation, Reti and so on, they play. And they have 10-player double round robin, 18 rounds. No, no luck. I mean, he wins the tournament ahead of Capablanca, 1924. And he's still exceptional. He is the one who faces, along with others, the Reti defense. 1924 is the debut of Reti defense, Reti opening. Reti beats Capablanca. The first game Capablanca loses in 8 years. It happens in New York, 1924.
Wow.
In Reti opening. This idea, b3, bishop b2, rook c1, c2, queen a1.
Yeah.
So, but in several more rounds, Reti faces Lasker, and Lasker beats with black with the system. So, Lasker is amazing in 24. Then comes 1925. 1925 is the first Moscow International Tournament already under the communism. And they pull a huge event in Moscow. It's just huge, and the crowds there is like probably the most attended chess tournament ever, by that time at least. And again, Lasker is in a great shape. So we see him continue to play, but the tournaments like that were not numerous, and new star emerges as Wilhelm, and already people are starting to talk about Wilhelm against Capablanca, and not Lasker against Capablanca. Once again, Lasker remains to be one of the top 3 players. Let's understand it very clearly. I would say he clearly is not second to basically to anyone, maybe a part of Capablanca. But in 1927, when Capablanca introduces a sort of a candidate tournament, because he has to play a match. He won in 1921, he didn't play a single match. So he decides he will make a tournament in New York, and the winner, or the second place if he wins, goes to play him. And what happens, guess? What Lasker does in this tournament.
Finishes at the top.
But then he would have played Capablanca.
Yeah.
He's not invited.
Really?
Yes. Capablanca doesn't invite Lasker to this tournament also. Lasker is clearly number 3 in the world by that time. Maybe Wilhelm is ahead of him, but that's it. So he invites Alekhine, he invites Nemtsovich, Kovalyubov, who else? There was Spielmann, who was a bright player but never was, but he doesn't like Alekhine. And that's where the, let's say, contention of Lasker as a candidate stops. I think it would be interesting to see if Lasker was invited and he would capture first or second after Kappa, because then it would lead to unique rematch. And by that time already Lasker would have been 59. But we see that Capablanca also, you know, his mistake and his, let's say, in a way unethical way to form the tournament led to that Alekhine qualifies and Alekhine goes to beat Capablanca next. So in 1927. Then Lasker stops playing. He plays very, very, very early.
So for Lasker, after the World War, did he play a match or, I mean...
He played after World War I, he played with Capablanca.
Only that one match?
Yes, only one match.
No, nothing else?
Yeah, no, nothing else.
And that happened in which year?
1921.
21.
Yes.
And so for 7 years, from like 1914 to 1918, so 3 years after the war, he didn't play at all.
He didn't play at all, or maybe it was a small tournament, yeah.
So in a way, that's 27 years. Would you say that it's, like we keep saying 27, but he played very less in those 27 years.
Yes.
So maybe that record is not as valuable as perhaps...
Of course you can, let's say 10 years now would be more or less like 27 then.
Right.
More or less. It's difficult to compare because it also depends who were contenders and when. So it's hard to. There's no equation here, but more or less, yeah. Of course, he didn't play a lot. So then comes another period of his inactivity. He's frustrated by that. He knows that he's one of the top, but okay, if he doesn't have chance to compete for world championship, so he doesn't. And what happens? He doesn't play for several years more. And surprisingly, he gets back to life. He focuses once again math, bridge, golf, writing books, maybe a bit of a family life. And then Hitler comes to power in Germany. 1933. Dark times, especially dark times for Jews. And Lasker, of course, as a chess player or as a smart person, he knew to calculate and to see things in advance. And in 1934, he already 34, imagine, 5 years to the war yet, he writes to Moscow, asking to relocate there and to be granted the residence in Russia, in Soviet Union. It was approved, and he moves at the end of 34, beginning of 35. And what to do in Soviet Union? He starts playing chess again. And he plays stunningly in the Moscow International Tournament 1935.
He's already 67.
He's 67. It's a huge tournament with all the best players in the world, Capablanca included, apart of Alekhine, because Alekhine, as you know, he escaped Russia after the revolution, and he's in a bit of a major conflict with Soviet Chess Federation. So what happens? How would Lasker fare in this tournament? But Botvinnik is already there, Capablanca is still there, you have the whole generation of strong players.
Did he win it or
no, he didn't win, he was third. He was third, but he played exceptional tournament and almost won it. He was very close. The event was won, shared by Botvinnik, and by that time in his absolute pinnacle of his career was Saladin Floor. Floor was a outstanding player who was a bit too lazy to become world champion. Otherwise, he was one of the most gifted players of the generation. He was born in 1908, I think. And throughout 1930s, let's say 1931 to 1938, he was absolutely top player. Let's say top 5, around top 5 all the time, occasionally top 3. And he wins along with Botvinnik this tournament in 1935, and Lasker is third, Capablanca is fourth. And then on very strong field beneath. So Lasker stays in Soviet Union. He works. He writes a book, actually, about Soviet pioneer starting playing chess or something like that. He participates in some tournament, and he actually, the curiosity, he plays for Soviet Union. He plays in Nottingham, he plays Hastings, and in this tournament he plays under Emanuel Lasker, the Soviet Union. He represented because he said he wouldn't represent Nazi Germany. And that's understandable, and otherwise who would represent? But once again, his feeling for changes. He starts feeling that Stalin and his terror, internal terror in Russia, Soviet Union, will rises up. And they say that the most tragic, bloody year in Soviet history was 1937, when millions of people were sentenced to Gulag and killed and shot without investigation and so on. Guess what? Lasker in 1937 relocates from Soviet Union to United States.
Oh.
Yes. He has been, let's say, very respected, and so he had excellent house in the center of Moscow and so on, but he realizes that being a foreigner, being also a German citizen also, well, it's very dangerous, so he relocates to USA. And that basically ends his chess career, because when he relocates there, he is already, of course, he's 68, 69. And he has no motivation more to play. They played a couple of games with Marshall, just sort of exhibition matches in 2 games, but that's it. And he goes to die several years after in 1941. That's his life path. But once again, for many years, for many generations, the whole image of Lasker, of a thinker, of a person. Okay, nowadays it's not very common to see person smoking. You will see Lasker with a cigar and deeply, let's say, immersed in some thought. He was he was versatile. His talents were really immense, and he was a person who would not. There are 2 types of intellectuals. There are intellectuals who are entirely immersed in their work, let's say mathematicians or physicians. They focus in chess. You have people like that also. They would be great in their, but they would be, let's say, cut off the real life. He was very much in the real life. He knew very well what's going on in society. He knew very well what and how should be done to, of course, it benefited himself as well, but it benefited chess in large way, that he positioned chess in a different way. That the chess grandmaster became something of a meaningful connotation. And for generations to come, chess was regarded as something that smart people do, thanks to Lasker. Not thanks to Steinitz, not thanks to Morphy.
Oh.
Because previously we had these eccentric geniuses or sometimes even mentally unstable people who would be very talented in chess. Lasker was of absolutely different breed. Intellectual, fighter, player, all in one. He was not, it's interesting, he was not a theoretician. He was not a tactician. He was not a strategist even. But he was absolutely,
he was good at everything.
Yeah, and he was this, let's say, the smartest person who ever played chess, probably. Smartest in the sense that he was, his intellectual abilities were, I think, still unrivaled. And that's why when I hear old guys didn't understand anything about chess, and today any 2500 would wipe out the champions of the past, I don't think so. Obviously, the theory advanced big time. But give them not couple of years, couple of months. I think as a guy of the caliber of Lasker, of his, of his immense intellectual power, would be very important. Because it would take a bit of time to learn the patterns and the theory.
Yeah.
You knew the H4 pawn haven't been refined all the time, but otherwise, no, these people basically built modern chess. And even if you go with this line, Lasker played on par with Botvinnik when Lasker was already 67. Now, think about it. Botvinnik, you can build a bridge. Played on par with Fischer when Botvinnik was, let's say, they played in 1 and 62, so Botvinnik was 51. So we can build the bridge. Lasker was equal to Botvinnik, Botvinnik was equal to Fischer, and you already get to modern days, you know.
Right.
So it's, for example, of Korchnoi, who played all these big guys, and then he played the modern guys. So I would say the person with intellectual abilities of Lasker would be very much able to compete. Not so Capablanca, actually, because that's the next part of our series, and it would be reported probably in a couple of months or so. But that's absolutely different person and personality, and there I wouldn't be so sure about his ability to adapt to today's life. But Lasker for sure, out of all world champion, is probably the one which I have the biggest appreciation in terms of immense intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, getting to know Lasker through your lens has actually made us appreciate the kind of champion he is, not just chess-wise, but also in his life. And I think we now understand so many things happened in his life. It was a very long career.
Long career, long life, very difficult times. Two world wars.
Yes, 2 world wars.
German Nazi, Stalin times, and he was from the times where there was no cars. I mean, they just started to appear, or no cars at all. And he lived up to 1940s, and then it was really, really long life. And chess has changed a lot. And what's important, the positioning of chess, the image of chess changed big time throughout his career, and largely thanks to his contribution to the game, and largely thanks to which person he was.
Amazing. Well, Emil, thank you for telling us about Lasker and for enlightening us about him. And we look forward to meeting you again and talking about Capablanca.
Great. We shall proceed.